Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to be giving you a tour of my newest build. I'm sure most of you already know what this is, but for those of you who don't, this is a Atomrc Dolphin. And from what I've heard, this is supposed to be a really good aircraft. I've seen loads of reviews about it, and pretty much everyone praises it. And last year, actually, I did a poll on Instagram, asking people for sort of suggestions for a new aircraft to build. And I think about 75% of people at that time actually recommended this aircraft. Now, at the time, I kind of ignored everyone, to be honest, because I ended up buying the Atomrc Swordfish instead, and that was a very good aircraft. But recently I decided to retire it because over time it's got a bit damaged. It was involved in a big crash and ended up just being a bit tatty. So I decided to retire it and take the electronics out, and then obviously do a new build, and I decided this time that I would go for the Dolphin, just to see if the hype is real and whether this aircraft really is as good as everyone claims. Now, as I said in the video thumbnail, my goal with this build was to make it as clean as possible. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I always kind of put a bit of care into my builds. I don't just sort of chop my electronics in and just have the wiring everywhere. I always try and make them neat and tidy. But on this build, I've kind of gone a little bit above and beyond on it. I really took my time in designing like special 3D printed parts, and like carefully thinking about the wiring and stuff, because I really want this build to be really neat and tidy. So in this video, I'm just going to give you a bit of a tour, show you what I've done, because I'm quite proud of it. It's not perfect. There's a few things that, maybe I could have done a little bit better, but for the most part, I'm quite proud of it. So I just want to kind of show it off. And then at the end, I'll show you some flight footage and then tell you what my thoughts are. So to start the tour, we'll start at the front of the aircraft. And the first thing I did was I designed a 3D printed nose. Now, the Dolphin does come with two different noses as standard. There's like a pointed nose and then there's a flat one. The flat one's designed for if you want to carry a GoPro in the nose. And originally when I bought this aircraft, that was actually kind of my thinking. I don't have a GoPro, but I've got the DJI Osmo Action 4, which is a very similar sort of size and style of camera. So I was thinking about putting my Osmo Action 4 in the nose, but actually once I got the aircraft, I found it didn't fit, which is a little bit annoying. But that's fine. But I didn't like the pointed nose very much. So what I did was I designed my own 3D printed nose, and this is made out of TPU. It's squishy plastic, so it's like good for like impact absorption in a crash. And hopefully you can see there, so we've got the FPV camera in the front there, and then we've got a little like small air intake. If I just take this off, you can kind of see it a little bit better. So the camera that I've got in there, I fly with Walksnail, so I've got the Walksnail Avzar Pro camera in there. In my opinion, that's the best Walksnail camera to date. And the way this mount works is the camera is installed just as a friction fit. I deliberately made kind of like the mounting a little bit small, because TPU is flexible. I've been able to kind of like push the camera in, and it very much fits in there with friction. It's not going to come out, it's very tightly secured. And at the moment, this nose also fits into the fuselage with friction. There are magnets here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's on the design for the mount here, I've actually put some little holes here so I can install some magnets as well, so that this can be secured with magnets too. I will get around to that at some point, but at the moment, it does fit quite nicely just with friction. Pretty happy with this. The little air intake I put in the front there, that's actually, it's not airflow for the VTX. We'll get to that in a minute. It's actually airflow for the camera. People always worry about their VTX is overheating, which is a valid thing to worry about. But on these like these HD cameras, the cameras also get quite hot. And last year I actually did have a camera die on me because it overheated too much. So this little air vent here is very much just to provide a little bit of cooling for the camera. And so far it seems to have worked absolutely fine, which is good. Now, as for the VTX, so let's now show you inside the battery compartment. And as you mentioned, one of the first things I did when I got this aircraft was I took out all the plywood parts. So when you get the aircraft new, this was a P&P kit. When you get it new, there's a plywood plate in here, there's one in the back there, and there's also like motor mounts and things. I took all the plywood parts out and replaced them all with 3D printed ones that I designed myself. It's kind of hard for you to kind of appreciate this 3D printed mount very well here, so I'll put a picture up here so you can see what it looked like before I installed it. It's, for the most part, it's the same as the plywood part that was originally in there. The only difference is that at the front of the mount, there's like little brackets. That's for installing the video transmitter. And hopefully you can kind of see it here. So basically the video transmitter is installed onto those little mounts there, just using the screws that comes with the video transmitter. And then above it, there's then this secondary little bracket, and that's got a little 5-volt fan on it. And that's what's providing the cooling for the video transmitter. Now, a lot of people tell you that you should never do this. You should never just have your video transmitter inside your aircraft without like direct airflow over it. Look at you, Painters 360. But actually, it works absolutely fine. I've tested this extensively with the cover on. Just literally just sat on the bench. I've left this here for like half an hour. The video transmitter hasn't shown a single overheating warning because that fan is working really well. Now, I've carefully designed this little bracket here so it can be removable. See, it's a bit tight. You kind of want it to be tight. But if you just kind of squeeze and pinch it, you can then lift it out the way like that. And the reason why I've done that is because sometimes you might want to be able to access the bind button on the video transmitter, mainly for if you want to do a firmware update, but also for any reason, like say you get new goggles or something, you might want to access the bind button. So that's why I've designed it, so that this little part can be removed. But like I said, it is a very tight fit. It's quite hard to remove, so I don't think it's ever going to fall out. It's quite hard to get back in. But yeah, once it's in, it's not really going anywhere. It's quite a tight fit. So yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Also down here, you'll see this little bit here. So this is actually the little USB plug for the video transmitter. The reason why I've chosen to permanently install it in the aircraft like this is mainly because with the Walksnail system, these little USB extension things, they always come with these really bad quality plugs. I don't know why they use such cheap plastic, but the little plugs that go into the video transmitter always break after like 1 or 2 uses. So I kind of figured with this build, I'd just install the plug into the video transmitter and then just leave it there permanently. So I'm not going to keep taking it in and out. Just have it there permanently. And that works quite well, because it means now if I ever want to just take like footage off of the aircraft, off the video transmitter, I can literally just plug the cable straight in. I haven't got to go digging around in my spares bin trying to find that. It's always there, ready to use. The other thing to mention, so when you get the Atomrc Dolphin new, there's this little hole here that's already in the fuselage for an antenna. Annoyingly, the antenna that comes as standard with the Atomrc Pro BTX kit, the antenna wasn't quite long enough to reach there, so I did have to make my own little hole here to install that. As you can see, the antenna doesn't stick up a whole lot. That's as high as I can currently have it. I would ideally have it a little bit higher. So what I might do at some point is I might just buy a different antenna, like maybe one of the cherry antennas. I can't remember what they're called. I'll put it on the screen at the bottom. I might buy one of them just so it's a little bit higher up, just to improve signal performance. But saying that, so far I haven't had any issues with it. But yeah, that's something that I might change. Now, a crucial thing here in the bid to keep the wiring tidy. So I've actually hidden the wiring. You might just about be able to see it down there. So the wiring for the video transmitter and the fan, it actually goes underneath this plate, and then this plate is actually glued in place. I'm hoping that at no point in the future will I need to change that wiring or anything, so obviously that's going to be really annoying, having to remove this plate so it is glued in place. But hopefully I won't have to. I don't really foresee any reason why I'd need to do that. So yeah, that is the sort of the front of the aircraft, and hopefully you'll agree, it looks quite neat and tidy. So let's now move to the back. This is the more interesting bit. This is where the flight controller is. And this is where most of my work went into. So this is what I've come up with. Hopefully you'll agree that looks quite neat and tidy. It's not as good as I would have liked it to have been, and I'll explain why in a bit. But yeah, for the most part, I think that was pretty good, and I'm pretty proud of it. So it took me about 2 weeks just to design this 3D printed like tray here. This tray that's got like the mounts in for the various bits. And that's because I spent a lot of time just trying to work out different wiring configurations and trying to work out the optimal way to kind of set this up to have the wiring as neat as possible. And what I've done for the most part is I've tried to just sort of be a little bit kind of creative with the wiring. So for example, here, this little plug here, this is the where the 5-volt power supply for the fan and the nose is coming from. Rather than just have that wire kind of just like trail across here and disappear down there, what I've done is I've actually, hopefully you can see it, I've actually tucked it in underneath the flight controller. So the flight controller is it's like two PCBs stacked on top of one another. There's a little gap in between, so that wire goes down there through the gap. It then comes out on this side here, and then it disappears down into that hole there. And also the wires for the FPV kit, they also disappear down into that hole there, where they then run underneath this plate, and then also run underneath that plate down there. You can just about see those wires actually just in there. Same as with the down here, like if there's ever an issue with the FPV wiring, it's going to be a real pain to change them, because I'll have to lift this entire mount out as well as that one, but hopefully, fingers crossed, that will never happen. Just to mention, so this flight controller here, this is the Atomrc F405 Navi flight controller. So this came out of my Atomrc Swordfish, as did this GPS here, which is the BN225. But I'm pretty sure if you bought the RTH version of this aircraft, sorry, just move the aircraft out of the sunlight there a little bit. I'm pretty sure if you bought the RTH version of this aircraft, it would come with this exact flight controller and this exact GPS anyway. I just bought the P&P version because there was no need for me to buy the RTH because I already had these electronics. So yeah, if you have the RTH versions of aircraft, in theory, as far as I know, you'd be able to, if you wanted to, use my 3D printed mounts, and this stuff will just plug in straight away. I did adjust some of the wiring a little bit though, so like you'll see here, hopefully, it might be out of focus. This plug here was a standard, it's designated for the GPS, but I've actually reprogrammed the flight controller, so instead this plug's being used for the receiver. And the reason for doing that is just because on this side of the aircraft here was the hole for the receiver antenna, so it made sense for the receiver to be on this side, and therefore it made sense for it to plug in there rather than have the wire trail over the top. And then yeah, obviously the GPS then plugs into a different UART on this side. Just because the flight controller's got labels on for what the UARTs apparently are used for, you can change them. There's no reason why you can't reassign them to do different things. So that's what I've done. In the back of the aircraft, some LEDs, which I'll talk about in a bit, but to keep the wiring for that tidy, so that's where the power for the LEDs are coming from, and then that just disappears under the flight controller. I'm not really sure how well this will come out on camera, but basically the mount that this flight controller is on has got about a 5mm gap underneath it. So I've trailed those wires underneath there, and they then exit out through here and go down through there. Again, just trying to keep the wiring kind of hidden away, trying to keep it neat and tidy. The XT60 lead, again, goes underneath the flight controller, disappears under that gap, and then it comes up here and loops around, keeps that nice and tidy. And as you can see, I've added a couple of cable ties here just to kind of, one, hold the cable nice and straight, looks a bit tidier, and two, it just provides a bit of strain relief if there's ever a crash, saves like this getting yanked and kind of ripping on the flight controller. The only wiring in here that I'm not super happy about is the wiring here for the servos in the wings. I could have done this neater if I had decided to glue the wings on, but I wanted to still retain the ability to remove the wings, which meant I had to kind of leave these wires reasonably kind of loose. I would have much preferred it if I had some channels here, which they kind of routed through and then went in there. This, like I said, if the wings were glued on, I would have done that and had those wires looking much neater. But what I have done here is this little black bit here. This is just a twist tie. So at the moment, the wires are sort of like reasonably neatly kind of held together. But if I ever want to take the wings off, I can just undo that twist tie, remove these wires, and yeah. I did shorten these wires because these were quite long. There's a lot of excess in here, so I shortened them so they are literally just the length they need to be. But I think it looks okay. I mean, I reckon they could have been, like I said, if the wings were glued on, I could have done it a little bit neater, but I think this is probably about as good as you can do whilst retaining the ability to remove the wings. Just want to quickly mention about the antenna for the receiver. So when you buy the aircraft as stock, there's a hole here for an antenna, but the hole is actually quite big. It's way bigger than my antenna is. So what I did was I just designed a little 3D printed little like shim. Again, made it out of TPU, made it a little bit too big, so then I can kind of push it in and squeeze it into a friction fit. That kind of just then plugs the hole, and then the antenna just kind of popped up through it, just to keep it looking a little bit neater. So yeah, that's the main hardware compartment. So now move to the back of the aircraft. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, so this was a P&P kit. So that means it came with a motor, ESC and servos pre-installed. I'll just show you the underneath here, actually, while we're at it. So the ESC is in there. As with all of the other plywood parts, this plate here was originally a plywood one, but I just replaced it with a 3D printed one. There's no advantage to doing that other than the fact I think it just looks a little bit nicer. And then the ESC in there, the only thing I did, which is a little bit special, is I just put some heat shrink on it. And that's because, as well as trying to make this a really clean build, I also wanted to make it a little bit rainproof. That's just because where I live, it's really bad weather at the moment. It's really bad weather all the time. It's raining quite a lot, but quite often when it's raining, it's only raining quite lightly. So I figured I would try and design this aircraft so it's rain resistant. It's not waterproof by any means, and I wouldn't want to fly it in a heavy rain shower. But I've tried to be sort of considerate of the way that I've done things so that if I was to fly in a light rain shower, all the electronics would be protected. So yeah, that's why I add a little bit of heat shrink to the ESC, just to add a little bit of water resistance. And it's also why this air intake in the nose there, why I kept it quite small. I didn't want a huge, great big air intake in there because I didn't want to be sort of sucking in potentially loads of rain, which would go, you know, all over the video transmitter down here. Just that air intake is nice and small, just to provide cooling for the camera and nothing else. And when the this canopy's on, like there is an air intake there, but the air intake's blowing that way, and it's obviously it's past the point where the video transmitter is. So even if any rainwater did manage to get in there, it's only going to go sort of here, like on the battery, which itself is reasonably kind of sort of rain resistant anyway. Any rain wouldn't be able to get down there, so that's a good thing. So yeah, I did just add heat shrink to the ESC just for a little bit of sort of mild rain resistance. The motor on the back, I don't actually know what this is. It's an Atomrc branded one. What's that, 2306.5. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But yeah, I'm using the stock motor. The only thing I had to do a little bit special in this build was I had to use a 3D printed mount. So when you buy the aircraft, it comes with 3 different mounting options. By default, there's a plywood mount installed in the aircraft already, which I removed. There's then additionally 2 3D printed mounts, a small one and a big one. I've ended up using the big one, and the reason for doing that is it pushes the motor a little bit further back. And that's something that I found I had to do because the 3D prints I've used, especially the one up here in the nose, is a little bit heavy, and it meant that getting CG locked in was a little bit hard. By moving the motor back a little bit, it's now allowed me to, you know, perfectly get CG. There's actually 2 3D printed mounts. I don't know how well it'll come on the camera, but the big one on the left, the pure white one, that's the one that comes with the aircraft. The smaller one on the front, that's one that I printed myself. And that's just because I didn't want any plywood parts on the aircraft. I wanted them all to be 3D printed. So I took the original plywood part, just scanned it into my computer and then 3D printed it just to keep it kind of matching the rest of the aircraft. Now, the last thing to talk about is on the back of the aircraft here, I've got 2 LED strips, and I've never used this type of LED strip before. I don't know how well it'll come on the camera here, but these are really thin LED strips, like a thin ribbon. It's only about 4 millimeters thick. It's kind of a new type of LED strip that's come out sort of in like the last year or two. The specific ones I'm using here are actually designed for a Beta FPV Pavo like tiny whoop, like mini whoop kind of quad. But I just able to find them online. You can just buy a pack of these LEDs, so I did. And I'll tell you what, I'll plug the battery in, then you can see what they look like. Okay, so that's the battery plugged in, and as you can see, these LEDs are ridiculously bright. I've never had LEDs actually as bright as these. I mean, even in sort of bright daylight like it is at the moment, they're still very, very bright. Kind of washing out the camera a little bit here. Yeah, they're really good LEDs. I'm looking forward to doing some night flying with these. I reckon they look fantastic. The only thing is, I do wish, in hindsight, that I'd bought red ones rather than green. And that's just because this aircraft sort of accidentally ended up having a bit of a red, black and white theme. Obviously, it's a black and white aircraft, but I've got a red flight controller, red braided sleeving on the wires, and a red motor. So it kind of would have made sense to have red LEDs to go with. The green's kind of my favorite color, so that's what I've gone with. Whilst I've got the battery plugged in, actually, I'll just let you hear the fan. And as you can hear, it's actually quite quiet. I've got a similar fan in my Hewing T2, which was provided by Hewing. That fan's actually really loud, whereas this one actually is quite quiet, which is quite nice. So yeah, that is basically a bit of an overview, a little bit of a tour of the builds that I've done. And like I said, I'm feeling pretty proud of it. It's come together quite well. Hopefully you'll agree that I've done a pretty good job of keeping this as a pretty clean build. I know it doesn't matter really whether your build is clean or not. I mean, like, I think most guys out there, they just kind of just throw everything in. They have a rat's nest of wires everywhere, and it still flies just as good. But for me, I like my builds to be just really clean and really tidy, and I think this is probably the cleanest one that I've done so far. So yeah. So I guess the thing to talk about now is, what was it like to fly? So far, I've only done the one flight with it. I did the maiden flight a couple of days ago when the weather was good. And for the most part, the flight was okay, but admittedly, I did feel a little bit underwhelmed. I've heard a lot of great things about this aircraft. So a lot of people saying it flies fantastic, but for me, it just felt a bit sluggish and a bit underpowered. I'll put a bit of footage up here in the corner for you to see. So on the launch, as I threw it, rather than go straight up, it dipped down, almost hit the ground, and then managed to climb back up. And that's whilst I was pulling back on the stick as well. Because this aircraft has got reflex built into the wings, you shouldn't really need to be pulling back on the stick as it goes up. It should just kind of go straight up. So I'm thinking that the issue is probably that it's a little bit underpowered. I think because I've added these 3D prints, especially this one in the front, because I had to make this plate quite thick. Obviously, you want it to be thick, so if there's a crash, the battery isn't going to rip out and break it. Made that quite thick, which meant the aircraft ended up being a little bit sort of nose heavy, and then obviously this print here is quite sort of big as well. I think adding all these 3D prints has made the aircraft a little bit too heavy for the stock powertrain. Annoyingly, my scales are broken at the moment, so I can't weigh the aircraft. It doesn't feel especially heavy to me, and I'm not using a big battery. I'm just using a 4S 3000 milliamp lithium ion battery. It doesn't feel like crazy heavy to me, but I suspect that the stock powertrain isn't quite up to the task of moving the aircraft with the weight that I currently have mine at. But like I said, I got the aircraft up in the air. It flew okay, but I didn't feel especially wowed by it. I flew the aircraft for about 20 minutes, and like I said, for the most part, it flew all right. But I mean, for example, like, I found I was having to use quite a lot of throttle just to be able to keep the aircraft flying sort of level. I think it's about like 50-55% throttle. Anything below that, the aircraft will lose height. So yeah, I was running the throttle quite high, which again is probably an indication that the powertrain isn't really up to the job. But also I tried doing some acrobatic maneuvers. So like I tried doing a couple of rolls, and I found them to be a bit slow, and just in general, the aircraft felt a little bit sluggish. Now, at the moment, I'm just using all of the stock PIDs and rates on INAV 7.1. And also on the linkages on the inside of the aircraft, I'm using the second hole down. So I think it might be worth me just moving the linkage up to the top hole there. And it might also be worth me just sort of tweaking the rates a little bit. Hopefully get the aircraft just to sort of feel a little bit more agile and a little bit more maneuverable. But yeah, like I said, in general, the aircraft, it flew just okay. It didn't really wow me. I did feel a little bit underwhelmed. But yeah, I suspect it's probably because I've made the aircraft just a little bit too heavy. So what I think I'm going to do between now and the next video is I think I'm probably going to replace the powertrain. I've actually seen a lot of guys have done that anyway, either because the stock electronics have burnt out, or probably same as me, they just felt it was a little bit underpowered. So I think, yeah, I'll probably be replacing the powertrain. I'll get a better motor, maybe a bigger prop or a smaller prop, I don't know, and a different ESC. I'll have a look online, I'll see what people recommend. And yeah, if you own one of these aircraft and like you've upgraded the powertrain, like please do let me know down below what you've got on there. I'll be interested to know, so I kind of have a bit of a heads up on what to change. But yeah, first impressions of flying the aircraft is it was just entirely okay, but it didn't really wow me. I'm hoping that when I next fly this, after I've done the upgrades and the tweaks to the rates and things, that I'll feel a little bit more kind of impressed and excited about it. But yeah, in general, it's a nice aircraft. I think the kit's very nice, and I'm quite proud with sort of how it's come together. Hopefully you agree. Like, I think I've done a reasonably good job of like coming up with like quite a clean build. Yeah, we'll have to just see how the next flight goes. Anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. Like I said, I mostly wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of a tour of the aircraft. But yeah, if you enjoyed watching this video, if you like what you see, then please do give the video a like down below. And until then, I guess I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers. Bye.